You're listening to a podcast called Gary, with me, Tom Mann.
And me, Adam Etheridge.
In this week's episode, we'll be discussing Superman, the Christopher Reeve Story, a 2024 documentary exploring his life and legacy.
Welcome, guys, to another episode of a podcast called Gary. And yes, as we've just seen there, we're going to be talking about Christopher Reeves and the Superman documentary. So I believe, Tom, you're going to show us, put the video on now. But just before you do, any quick thoughts?
Christopher Reeve, no S, was our Superman. And it was just a very emotional watch. Here we go. Here's the trailer. Wow. My thoughts are, I must have watched that trailer 5 or 6 times, and every time I have to stop myself from welling up because it's just so emotional. And my first thoughts really are, what an aptly named film for his autobiography, Superman, and how fitting he was to play that role, because the guy just had such fortitude and mental strength to go through what he did and then come through the other side and make a positive out of it for other people. Just incredible.
See, my take from it was that it was good in the fact that it didn't sort of just sugarcoat it and make him out to be this saint. I think it was a good thing that in a lot of ways, it was almost he became Superman, or he used the kind of the embodiment that he had of being that role to help him achieve what he did. And I think if from the parts of the documentary where it shows that he was a sort of this method actor and very much into kind of embodying the kind of the very serious about all his roles, and then to accept the role that he accepted as Superman. He did the same thing. He did all the things that method actors would have done, is beefed up and did all the kind of the posture and the sort of the acting, like again, where he transforms from being Kent back into, this is it. It's this whole kind of, he is Superman because he takes the glasses off in one of the scenes, and he stands up straight and he's relaxed and he is Superman. And then he has to then put the glasses back on and assume this role of, the kind of the person that he's pretending to be. And I think that this is the thing, because then as you go through it, he does get caught up in that whole kind of Hollywood lifestyle, and who wouldn't? I mean, again, a guy who was trying to make a buck, being an actor on the stage, to being this superstar from nothing, in a way. And then he has that kind of, it's sort of those moments where you kind of think, oh gosh, actually he was human, and then this happened to him, and then it hit, for most people probably would have been, especially in that time, would have just let that kind of finish them off, and would have just been, committed to or assigned to their role as basically just a living piece of flesh, and just a head in effect. So I think, that was the powerful thing, in a way, that he became what people saw him as, in this kind of, this Superman, and he actually did embody a lot of the sort of the characteristics and the role of inspiring people.
I think you hit the nail on the head when you said, to begin with, that he wasn't a perfect human being at all. and he was complicated. And I liked the fact that the documentary went into that. He had a very difficult relationship with his father.
Yeah.
And it doesn't sound like it was a great relationship with his mother either.
Yeah.
His father was an academic, extremely intelligent guy by the sounds of it, who could translate
Very hard.
Russian. Very hard on him. Never happy, never proud, or never showing of it anyway. And there was that sort of heartbreaking moment where they said, when he told him that he was going to play Superman, his father got a bottle of champagne, which was very uncharacteristic of him. And then there was actually a misunderstanding, and his father thought that he was going to play the George Bernard Shaw Superman on stage, and rather than this comic book character. And then he was extremely disappointed. And there's even an interview where his father expresses his disappointment. And so he didn't have a wonderfully idyllic childhood. I think his parents split up. But one thing that came through about him as a character throughout his life was a sense of determination. I think from even before his accident, he was an extremely driven, focused character. And at times possibly to the detriment of relationships and things like that. And clearly, his first serious relationship with Gail, the mother of his first two kids, was, although it started off very well, there was obviously he struggled to commit, potentially because of the examples that his parents had set in their marriage.
Yeah.
But the point is, you're right, he was complex, and yet, he used the phrase, if I can describe what happened to me, is I went from a participant to an observer. With the support of his family, he was able to, as you say, almost play the role that the hand that life had given him to the utmost best. But he clearly that was not a role that he would have chosen.
Yeah.
And just going back to your point about how the documentary is very frank, and I think he was frank in a good way about who he was, in that he did admit his last role before the accident was as somebody in a wheelchair. And in researching that, he used to go to the hospital where people in that situation were, and he used to leave the hospital every day thinking, thank God that's not me.
Yeah.
And he said he actually felt quite smug doing that, and he admitted this afterwards, and that must have been very painful for him.
Yeah. I think in a lot of ways it's hard, because for someone like him, who was very determined, as you say, and I think possibly, his want to succeed was kind of, say, the reason why, the biggest reason why he broke up with his first partner, because he didn't want to be tied down to that kind of life. He wasn't. I don't think he was ready in a way to commit, as you say, to a family life. He was quite acceptant of this life that he was, this sort of the movies and being on chat shows and all this, the kind of that element of it to raise his profile. So there's this kind of like this part where he was quite a humble man, I think, to begin with, but determined. Got this role, I think, ever got out the shadow of that character. And part of that was that he was more determined to try and shun that and be in roles that really, films that he was really never kind of, that were very big. And I think, it just, maybe that was the kind of the motivation that he felt like that was what he had to do to succeed. and I think the fact that what happened in an awful way gave him the actual something kind of how I want to say this. It kind of gave him the opportunity to be something that he eventually succeeded in for other people. He almost became the cause. So in terms of the,
Yeah, quite.
you know what I mean? I think if he hadn't had the accident, possibly he might have been one of those people that, if he hadn't actually managed to do something again that was successful, possibly could have been one of those sad stories where, you know, the rags to ruin kind of, you know, person where, you know, he was Superman, you know, one day and now he's a down and outer or something. I think, you know, there's possibly could have been that kind of lifestyle for him where I think as a person, as he was always seemed to be trying to just get out of that shadow, as I said before, of the role he played.
You're quite right. And the fact is, he had it so early on in his career. I think he was 24 when he played Superman or something like that. That he just had the biggest role of his life very early in his career. There was no sense of him having built up to it. You know, he clearly, he was a very talented actor, and he'd done the training. He'd gone to Juilliard, which is the school, you know, acting college to go to in New York. And he could, had he done his kind of career in reverse and maybe done 10 years of the kind of roles that he ended up trying to
boards.
do, treading the boards and doing the serious roles, and then got Superman, that would have been very different. But how could you ever top the fame of Superman? And, you know, in terms of, he just never was. Although his performances, and, you know, some of his films are very fondly remembered. I think the the Love Story one.
I love that. Somewhere in Time.
Somewhere in Time. Yeah.
Love that.
You know, so he still did some beloved films that people really do love, and he was a fantastically talented actor, which is why he just brought that role to life like no one else could. Superman.
Same with Somewhere in Time. I mean, you could. I think the fact that he was so believable, that the pain and there's that scene in it where he's in this, you know, in the past, and there's something that brings him back to the future, and then it's like he's someone's died because he can't get back to the past, and he's trying to, you know, this is it for him. It's that whole, and he expressed that way, or that, you know, that role in a way where, you know, even as a young man, I thought it was so sad, and I was able to empathize and connect. So he had that talent, and it was
he sure
unfortunate.
did.
Yeah,
he really did. He could connect with an audience, and he's you know, going back to the Superman, you know, he said the thing is, you've got to, the flying has to be with the eyes. It has to come from within. And I love that quote about when he tells you about how he got into the role of Superman. He didn't think of it like, you know, I'm strong, I'm Superman. It was more, right, what does it feel like to be an orphan and all alone and not like anyone else?
Exactly. All that power.
All that power, that's the starting point. And when he explains how he got into the character, you're like, yeah, of course. You know, that's why you love that character so much, the way he plays it, because he plays it with such humility and such humanity. And yeah, he was a phenomenal actor. But I think, just going back to what you were saying about his sense of purpose, I think you're absolutely right. I think as long as he would have continued without the accident, had that never happened, potentially he could have just become quite embittered, as long as his only main focus in life was kind of topping Superman and coming out of that shadow, which he would never have done. The accident, it did give him, or it pushed him to think way beyond himself and to think much more expansively and much bigger. about
Exactly.
what he could contribute towards the world. And so, yeah, it's quite a remarkable story, really is.
Yeah, I think the thing that's my thought on it. I mean, again, I might be wrong. I might have hit, not hit the point well, but I do feel that it's that tragedy that for him, if it would have happened to maybe anyone else, they wouldn't have been able to. And the profile that he had, because it was this whole kind of like Superman's in a wheelchair. Those moments of people going, wow, it's so much. There was so much publicity and high profile media about the man who we saw fly. Is bound to a chair and is almost basically effectively dead in the kind of the way that most people would have probably died, and then for him to not accept just being a head in a chair was the point that we then now know him for. His legacy, his sort of second legacy, effectively, is inspiring and inspiring those who are afflicted with disability, and encouraging and in helping people who need to be able to make these decisions to help these people to actually have some gratitude towards doing it. And I think that was the point, is that he, through his profile and his determination to try and walk again, that was the second inspiration for people. Is like, wow, if a guy like this, who's pretty much gone from being up here to now, as you say, observer of life, but not accepting that and telling people they don't have to accept it and that he can help these people, that was the kind of his second legacy really in life. And I the cynic in me probably is greater than some, but I don't think without the tragedy that we would be talking about Christopher Reeve in a positive way now. I think he would have probably been someone who would have been like, either say done and down and out and completely forgotten, or these kind of actors that do silly things. So thankfully we got to kind of enjoy both of those things through his legacy.
The remarkable thing about his accident and the remarkable timing of this documentary from a personal point of view is that my wife is retraining to be a nurse, as you know. So her latest student placement was with the spinal unit, and she saw this movie while she was on placement in this spinal unit at the local hospital. And so she learnt a lot about spinal injuries and the kind of the nature of them. And actually, he had what they call a hangman's spinal injury, something like that it's called. And actually, although you could say he was incredibly unlucky the way he fell off that horse, and actually perhaps it would have been kinder if he'd have been killed or what have you, actually it could have been worse, because not only could he have been incapacitated as he was and unable to breathe on his own and do anything for himself, but he also could have been neurologically damaged, and he might have been unable to speak properly. Now, the great thing for him was that he didn't lose the power of speech, and he didn't lose any of his neurological processes, so he was still as sharp in his head, which, okay, you can say is also a great thing to bear, because he's having to deal with the emotion of all that. But actually, it did mean that he could still make an incredible contribution, and he went on to. I think there was two elements to it, wasn't there? And I think we should probably mention the people around him, because they were so significant in, after the accident, in giving him that enabling him to continue and having a life. And there were two aspects to the sort of campaigning that he did. One of which was about the stem cell and the scientific research, trying to make people, trying to give people the gift of being able to walk. You know, if they were unable physically. And actually, that has borne fruit, isn't it? And at the end of the documentary, they said literally what he has done has helped to fund the research, which has enabled some people to walk when they wouldn't have been able to, which is fantastic. But the other side to it is, and I think this was more his wife Dana, was the other side to it was most people do not recover from these injuries, and they have to live the life that he did. And so it was about supporting people in a healthcare sense, in terms of getting a better deal, and all that side of things, and being able to live with those injuries. And so, that was just really inspiring what the family did. And I think it was his wife, obviously, with the role that she played, she saw it from the carer's point of view. And what an incredible woman she was. I think we just got to, mention that, because goodness me, the strength of character she had to remain so
committed,
enthusiastic and positive, and wow, I'm clearly she had many moments, but incredible lady.
They were draining their money and all sorts of things like that, and I think the best of us would have found that almost an impossible task to live with, and would have just stuck him in a home, and this sort of thing, and just and all this, and I think and again, I just think she was one of those, wasn't she? If there is a God, she was one of those where he took her, because was it like a year later or 14 months later that she died from cancer, and it was just like
sad.
Yeah, and it was like that. The lad, I mean, my God, he's just like a clone of his dad, isn't he? But I mean, it was just
Will,
Will, and you just think what a awful story, in a way, a sad story for someone who's had been so good in what we see. I mean, hopefully there was always stories about partners of these sort of people who are not very kind to them out of frustration, and you kind of understand some of these things. But they said, like, Stephen Hawking's partner was quite abusive at one point and things like that, and you can kind of understand the humanity part of it, where people don't act the best way. But in all what we've seen to know of her is that she was effectively like a saint in a way, because as I say, she fought for this, as you say, the case in so many different levels. Fought for him physically every day, tried to get campaign for, as you say, better care for people, and and also for trying to get support for the people around those people. That's it. So I think it was one of those where she just needed to she needed a break, really, and it wasn't the one that she got. And it was just again, sad ending for someone who in a lot of ways was, on the face of it, just such a genuinely nice person.
Absolutely. And you mentioned just then about the financial side of things, and again, that kind of brought it into sharp focus, because at one point in the documentary, they say because he had to have 24-hour care to be able to stay at home, that cost them $400,000 a year. I mean, crikey. It's just unbelievable, isn't it? Yes, exactly. That was back then. Just staggering amount of money. So it's the financial pressure, just you cannot imagine the sort of what they went through, and of course they were fortunate that that he had a good career, and obviously they were doing better than a lot of other people in that situation. But nevertheless, that money would soon run out, wouldn't it? At that kind of cost.
Yeah.
But also, I'd like to just the other people in the documentary that I think were significant. Robin Williams.
Yeah. Yeah, he's just one of those where, again, I didn't realize they were such good friends, and because of the kind of them coming through the acting school together and things like that, I think it was one of those where it was kind of a strange partnership, but at the same time, that it's sort of it suggests through the documentary that they're like the best of friends, and that they kind of. Obviously Robin's open kind of comedy, but then as we kind of find out his demons and stuff through that, were matched by Christopher's kind of maybe dry wit or dry kind of humor, sort of base and ground in sort of reality, seemed to come across as kind of someone who's very kind of reality based in life. Probably just from having to, as a young person with the upbringing he's got, he's probably had to accept a lot of reality fairly early on in life. And I just think, he could have probably been a lot more bitter man generally. So I think, people like around him, like Robin, and, I think there's a lot of people that come up in the show or in the documentary that knew him well, and that was just from mixing and being acting with him, and he was clearly someone they enjoyed working with and were friends with. So
yeah, there were some great contributors, weren't there? There was Susan Sarandon talks of him in the documentary. She's interviewed Whoopi Goldberg.
Yeah,
there's also Glenn Close and Jeff. Is it Jeff Daniels, the guy from Dumb and Dumber? Is that his name?
From Dumb and Dumber. Yeah, this is it. This is because his legacy is Dumb and Dumber from all the things he does.
He even mentions it in it, doesn't he?
No, exactly. I mean, I know, but this is it, and it goes back to that kind of start that he had. That he had people that he knew from very well from his days before Superman, and again, it was the time. Who was it? That it wasn't Daniels. It was someone else that said to him, "Oh, it was I can't remember his name, but he was like, don't do it." William Hurt, yeah. And I think flipping from one thing to another. The thing is, we're having this conversation about a man who really is only where he is because the collaboration of all those people on that film, and him being one of the main things, in terms of that he wasn't the star, he was a nobody, and they brought people in around him, and Hackman wanted to be in it, obviously, to be part of, because he thought if what's the guy who plays Jarrell again? Marlon Brando. He wanted to be, if Brando's in it, I want to be in it, kind of thing. It was that kind of attitude. So he was part of something that the studio wanted to make a success, but had no idea whether it was going to be a success. I mean, again, the fact that it was a superhero film, but the fact that between them all and all these kind of new technologies and Chris's acting, like they said about, they were gonna, when he first flew, he was gonna, you knew this already because you told me this way before I watched this, that when he flew at the screen the first time in the Palace of Solitude, that he did the bank away from the camera, which wasn't scripted, but Christopher thought that that's what would happen. That's what he envisaged in his mind at the time. Like you said, he flew with the eyes, and in those instances, those the parts that just made the technology kind of just so much more believable, because he just did those little things that kind
He
of
did
just
those
turned out to be.
details, and yes, exactly right. And I think he used every bit of knowledge he had, and of course he flew. So he was a pilot, and that was part of the thing that helped as well because he understood aerodynamics, and so he fed that into it as well. You know, if I was doing this for real, how would it actually work?
Yeah.
And he brought all that to it, and I think that was the point. He was such a professional, and he was, and the other thing is, having watched the Superman documentaries, when you see Margot Kidder interviewed, she used to say working with him on the Superman film was they were like a brother and sister kind of bickering because he was just so serious all the time and wanted to get it absolutely spot on, which is why it was such a good performance. Whereas she was kind of more of a joker and was like constantly ribbing him and trying to make him laugh.
Yeah.
And you know that clearly that chemistry, that contrast worked so well with Lois Lane and Superman in the movie. But yeah, he was. That's why he was so good because he was, I think, a bit of a perfectionist actually.
Well, that's exactly, and this is what I think this is what's come through, the aftermath of the films where again, the roles that he or the films that he was in didn't achieve the sort of the levels that he would want to have done. And so his this element of perfectionism might have been quite difficult as he came into the latter years of his acting, because maybe he was one of those type of actors that people found a bit more difficult because of those elements, and his wanting to do certain things and not just kind of maybe not just kind of accept and do things that were like corny or just money making. He probably was someone who was a bit more kind of, I want to do the art, and it not just be like he comments about in the trailer about if someone offers you a lot of money, just do it, sort of thing. And I think he'd learnt that lesson because obviously he had done that, and unfortunately he couldn't ever escape that role. And by the time he was doing the fourth film, he said it was such horse shit. I mean, it was just like it was ridiculous. And
I mean, that fourth one, literally the United Nations building or whatever, that was Milton Keynes Civic Hall or something.
really,
It was that bad. It was filmed in Milton Keynes. It was awful. It was such
all
low
those
budget.
people who live in Milton Keynes, with no offense, by the way. But no, I get what you mean. Is that the budget and the care. I mean, some people say the second film was a better film because I think there's an element of the I think the other thing is as well is that.
Well, actually, before we go on, here's a real a bit of a controversy. I think it's probably worth debating at this point. In that there's this big fan base. We've talked about toxic fan bases before, and there's this Richard Donner contingent. I would say the people that are really into the original Superman film, of which I am really one of them. I've always, literally that poster behind me is literally from the original film promotion of the Superman the movie that's not quite in shot. So I love that film. Yeah, Red Boots. People will always say, oh, well, Richard Donner was kicked off and he filmed most of the second film, and it would have been so much better if Richard Donner would have filmed the whole thing. And then they reference he brought out a Richard Donner version of Superman 2, which used screen tests and bits cobbled together. And people always say, oh, that's just the best. No, it's not, I'm afraid. Richard Lester also brought something to Superman 2, which was very good, and he brought a bit more humor. And by the way, Richard Donner also had humor, so let's not forget that. He was the Goonies director. Let's face it, he was not without humor as a director. But for me, Superman 2, has the best of both worlds. It has Richard Donner and it has Richard Lester, that both had slightly different styles, and they married together really well. And by the way, people say Superman 3 is a load of horse shit because Richard Lester directed that completely by himself. I actually really enjoy Superman 3, and I'm going to say that now because a lot of people, it's like heresy to say that. No, it's fun. It's a good film. It's fine.
Scare me, that film, because I was, when the woman gets sucked into the computer and she becomes a computer woman, that used to scare the shit out of me.
It's still scary now when you watch it. She's just she's horrible.
Horrific, isn't she? Yeah. And I think there's elements where he's like flying with that piece of ice and things like that. That's kind of like, it is a bit shit, but again, I think the idea, I think with a lot of these films as well, is that it is a superhero film, or a superhero that we are watching, and I think they don't come without their element of sort of cheese in a way. I think there's an element of it. I don't think until you've kind of gone into the whole sort of the Batman series with
Patterson.
Nolan.
The original series, like the gosh, the 60s, the Adam West one. Is that what you mean?
No, I'm thinking, the Nolan ones where he kind of Christopher Nolan with
Dark Knight and all that.
So it goes like completely like, this could be real, sort of, trying to make superheroes sort of, realistic.
Very gritty.
Yeah. And like Bourne-esque, that kind of, that sort of element. I think you can't escape that they are cartoons, and they're this is it. They're born from a place where, especially some of the older Supermans, where they were just like infomercials to "don't be horrible to your wife" sort of thing, or "I'll come up and beat the shit out of you" sort of thing. I mean, there was one of those, wasn't it? It was just those the kind of reels in those things where I just think there was a place for both, and I think the first one, I mean, there were still lines. I mean, again, there was parts where the whole Luther and the kind of the way he kind of dealt with Luther, they were like the corny bits, because it was like it was like the what was the henchman that he used to have, Luther had. It was like
Otis.
So he, and the music they play with Otis, and so they didn't sort of necessarily ham the Superman character up or give him too many hammy lines, but there were a few where where he catches the helicopter, he's like going up sort of thing. I think it's like that, isn't he? Something like that, where he catches her and.
It's the bit, the going up bit is where he's stood on basically the building, and there's a thief, and he's kind of using suction cups to go up the building.
Is that the second one or third one?
Going down. That's the first one. That's the first one.
The first one, yeah.
Exactly. You see, that's a cheesy bit, and that's Richard Donner, and also the very end. This country is safe again, Superman, thanks to you. I mean, that you couldn't get any cheesier than that.
Exactly.
So it's like, come on, guys, let's just chill out a bit on the vilifying Richard Lester thing, because it's just get your own opinion. Stop copying what everyone else says. Superman 2 is great. Superman, the first one's great. Superman 3 is maybe great is a strong word, but it's a fun movie. It's not bad to watch.
Trap of the trilogy is that by the third one, they're not really interested in the content. They just want to try and make as much money out of the brand as possible. I think that's happened less so nowadays. I think there's elements of trying to make films as good as they can individually, and of course. I think Disney have got stuck in this bit thing now with the whole kind of trying to accommodate too many things. So there's an element of that that's kind of ruined a few things. But I think generally, then much to do with the trap of trilogies, or more than sequels. Even sequels, they're saying that the trap of the sequel is that the second one is either crap or better than the first. And I think, it becomes that whole kind of, is the want to make the next film greater than the previous, and then again, what is it you want to do with it? Is it about finding new things? Is it about extending the brand? And I think that's the trap with the Superman, is that it was just about expanding the brand and trying to just keep that cash coming in as long as they could, because it was a Superman film, and people went because the films were adored. And I think the element of Chris's performance, because when Lois dies, and then again it's that same
it's
sort
like
of
chills
thing
down your spine, the way he performs that when Lois dies.
Yeah,
it's just the pure emotion.
You believe it. And I think that's the thing, is that it's again almost that point where it's that element of, what would a man of that ability, what would he have done? Because he could have done anything. And that's the thing. He, in that point of pain, he could have destroyed the world if he wanted to. And it's that kind of, even though he did, that whole kind of Jarrell thing, you mustn't meddle, and that kind of thing, and it's good in that way of kind of
it is forbidden for you to interfere with human history. One thing I do know certain, that is you are here for a reason.
Well, exactly. And I think there is that theme that's kind of been set by that film, where the whole kind of, with great power, the responsibility, and all that business, and that sort of echoes through a lot of superhero films of, do they turn dark? Do they turn, and what could they do? What should they do? Did they do? And it's that pain that again they have to absorb, because they can do something, but they just don't. Again, like the guy with the scene in the truck shop, the truck stop, where he's human and he's got his powers, and he gets beaten up, and then when he goes back, and that guy tries to twat him, and he just like just kind of
never seen garbage eat garbage before.
Yeah, that's it. And they haven't. I love the fact that I saw a snippet on TikTok about the Man of Steel, and it relates to that. There's that, but where the guy pours a beer over his head, and he shows restraint and doesn't do anything, and then outside he's like just completely kebabbed his lorry and things like that, where it's that kind of menace of that's what he could do, but he doesn't, because he's just committed to that kind of moralistic way of being. And it's it's kind of those, because have you seen the film that flips it on his side, where the boy is a villain? So he comes to Earth, and it's basically Superman, but I haven't.
Is it like with his eyes or something like that?
It's called something like Bright or something. I don't know, something like that, or where it's something to do with that. And he's just
and they're trying to protect him and keep him hidden and stuff, aren't they? And they're on the run.
Yeah, and that's it. He does things the opposite way. He starts hurting people and doing things that kind of because he can. And
because let's face it, Superman does have the capability to be a monster with that kind of power. Yeah. So you're absolutely spot on there.
I mean, like say we get again elements of that in the third one, don't we? Where the thing separates. It's like they create a kryptonite, don't they? And then it separates him, or turns him, and then he somehow manages to separate himself from that that self, and there's two of him, and it's like
what a great scene that is. Junkyard scene. I mean, crikey, that is just one of the best scenes in one of my all-time favorite movie moments, that junkyard scene.
When he's flicking the peanuts as well in the bar.
Yes.
Where it's like, again, he's just being, and that's it. It's that, it's that element of is that how he actually feels sometimes, and this is it, that whole kind of inner demon, or was it the kryptonite that just changed him? And this is it. It's like, is that an insight into his inner demon being able to go like, fucking humans, you know what I mean? And just kind of like, he could be that if he wanted to be. So yeah, I think it's the combination of him as a person wanting to be, like you say, the sort of the doing the right thing for his career, for his, for those sort of things, didn't always mean that he did the right thing by other people around him, especially, in that kind of transition period from being, in love with a girl from the met in the line into for some food, and the kind of childhood sweethearts in a way, and in that kind of, that magic was, or that sort of bubble that was the Superman film, to then the reality of this kind of life that he kind of wanted to have. And yes, it's a tragedy that, that they didn't last, but then at the same time, I think that it's the reality of the human who is within, this, again, this whole kind of like, the not the bad Superman, but the part of the man that wants things and doesn't want to be Superman, wants to be, famous, or wants to do what he wants to do, and doesn't want to be like, what other people want him to be.
And by the way, again, let's credit the other people around him, because his first partner, Gail, the fact that she was took part in this documentary and was so magnanimous about not only him, but also his second wife, Dana. I just thought she showed such class in the way that she conducted herself. And also all three kids, the way that they all got along. And obviously that's a credit to Chris himself and his partner and his new wife, that they made that happen. I just think that was fantastic, and great that all three of them have taken on the mantle of taking over the foundation, and especially Will, having lost both his parents in such a short space of time, as you said earlier on, to have siblings that he gets along with so well. I thought that was really touching, actually, that the family just pulled together and got along so well,
It's true. Again, the cynic and the sly element of me, when I saw them all, they're doing all this with the campaigns and all this, I just thought, God, never going to be short of a bob, or they're short of a job, are they? Because they, it's going to be a job they're always going to do, because it's a cause, which is a good cause. But, there's moments where I see them and they're all stood there and they're doing their things, and I think, yes, it's great that you do it. But I also think, there's a part of me was think, God, you lucky, aren't you? Because, you've had this person.
You cynical bastard.
I know that your dad's given you this, effectively, this thing to take on. And yes, good for you. But I also think, well, what else would you be doing?
What are you like, honestly?
I know, it's so awful of me, but it was just a little moment where I just thought, I saw them at the end, they're going, yes, and now we're all part of this foundation, and she's doing this and he's doing that, and it's like, elements of Narnia where they've all got their own blooming, they're all kings and queens of their own, their own. And I'll go to hell for saying it, but at the same time, there was just a little nugget of me just thought, what else are you doing? What else are you good at? Because hopefully you're good at doing that, because if it's doing what you're doing and it's for the right reasons, then wonderful. Hats off to you.
To me, I do know what you're saying. I do know what you're saying, because, of course, yes, but, they are mixing in circles by doing that with other people who are extremely influential presidents and ex-presidents and
because they're
all
Chris's
kind of,
kids.
that's right. And of course,
Yeah.
because and let's face it, we all take whatever advantages we're given in life. We all have them, and actually, I may have mentioned that before, didn't I? About Noel Gallagher's daughter and how she was very upfront about that, and I was quite impressed by that. That of course people do, but having said that, the way they came across, I did feel like they had a lot of integrity. I did feel that genuinely there were people that cared, and they spoke so well of each other. It didn't seem to be fake or forced. They did, and obviously you saw the home videos, didn't you, of them spending Christmases together and stuff. And I just thought that was great the way that their parents made that happen, because we all know through personal experience that blended families don't always work as well as that. So, that was nice to see. But yeah, I thought that the actual, in terms of the actual film itself, it was definitely something that I would recommend. I think whether you're a particularly big Superman fan or not, I think you will probably get something out of it, I would say.
Did you stare hard to see if the statue that was flying around in space was actually naked? With, like, could you see dong? I mean, there was one of those elements. It's like how many times it was flying around on the screen. It's like, is it? Are we going to see Superman statue cock here? All of just to tarnish this whole. Was there enough shadow just to cover his his what are we going to say, his
super schlong? I don't know.
Super dong, yeah. I mean, I think there was a bit too much of that as well. It was just that kind of arty-farty kind of statue flowing around. I did like it, but I think it was just there was a bit too many times.
You thought a bit too much of that going on.
Yeah, it was just a bit kind of too much of this kind of like what's it called? It's not deposition. It's what is it? Where they just have that kind of just the voiceover of kind of this
exposition.
Yes, and I just thought it was. I think in some ways there was enough footage to kind of, in a way, to kind of just it didn't need it. I think it was one of those elements where in some ways it kind of, for me, it was just a bit like, oh god, that fucking thing's on again, and it was. I don't know. It sounds really hard.
Did you feel like it cheapened it a bit? And I suppose there was almost an element of, with those things, it's like, fucking hell, we spent so much on this statue.
Exactly.
We've got to use it now.
That's how I felt. It's like, oh, someone's spent a lot of money on this graphic, and it's just like, how many times are you spinning around on, and this is it. It wasn't. I'm glad it wasn't like just like whoosh, that kind of like, those, when you find out in a PowerPoint you can screen wipe, and it's like, you just keep using that same sort of that feature. You're like, oh, for fuck's sake, how many times are you going to use screen wipe or dissolve in your presentation? But I think it was,
what's the other one there? The checker one, the barn door wipe.
It's just like, so yeah,
pinwheel,
yeah, exactly. Spin out, spin on. So I think there was a little bit of that where I was just like, I was a bit tired of kind of that, and so when it came on, I was just a bit like, is there a cock there? And they're just like, I was slightly disappointed.
Your mind was clearly wandering a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, in part because that was it, because those things were a little bit distracting, and it was just like, kind of like, okay, it did, for me, it was those little bits, I think, were a little bit OTT in terms of trying, because they were trying to mood set, weren't they? And that was it. They're trying to kind of, have those elements of kind of reset as such. But yeah, I think there was as a whole. I think the thing is that you could have done a documentary that was, you could do a series. I think that could have been the other thing, is they could have maybe done as more of a. They could have possibly broken it down into sort of 2 or 3 episodes or something, and because there's probably so much more they could have shown you, But
I agree with you, actually. I thought there was a lot more they could have shown. And I think I felt like, as an overall package, in the time frame they had or gave themselves for the film, I thought that it was well balanced. But there will be a lot of fans out there that would have liked to have seen an awful lot more Superman.
yeah,
And talked a bit more about each film, probably. And I know it wasn't really about that, but
yeah.
still, come on. You've got
I
an
think
awful lot of footage you could have used.
because I think that's true, because I think I think it's gone the sort of the arc of the story were very much this kind of rise, and he went from that to being Superman to then being in a wheelchair, and it's like they skipped a lot of the kind of, I mean, they had elements of his other films and stuff, but I think as as his life, yes, okay, this is about the Superman, but it wasn't about Superman in the fact that that was the only thing he did. And I think some ways it may have been an element of trying to kind of highlight some of the films that, again, in this day and age as well, of like, streaming, some of those films that didn't do very well back then, who knows if they're on a streaming service, they may get some kind of cult viewing or something.
Yes, you're right, because there were some bloody good films in there. Somewhere in Time, as you say, very good film. And also, it would have been good to have had a critic's point of view. Somebody saying he was
film,
really
also,
good in this, and his acting was good because of blah. To have that kind of critical view rather than just friends and family and all that. But mate, we are at time.
Yep.
I think that's been a fascinating discussion. I've enjoyed to hear your other thoughts from a kind of a more critical point of view, and I think that they were really interesting to hear. And I kind of agree with you on a few of those points. I didn't quite go where you did with the dong, but each to his own. On that bombshell, I'll bid you adieu. Until the next time, bye bye now.
Okay, mate.